No, you're talking now.
I am? Oh, hi. So we have a really interesting case for you today, which is about, it has to do with local or current politics about Hosni Mubarak's trial in Egypt. So we're going to argue today about whether or not it should be televised. What happened was it was televised for about 3 days, and then a judge ruled that it shouldn't be. So I'm going to argue about why it should be televised, and it's why it's really important for the sake of the Egyptian revolution that this does happen. So first of all, I want to talk about transparency. Transparency is something that was markedly absent from Egyptian society for a long time under this dictatorship. And we think now that you have this trial on TV, people are able to see how their government is working. And people have to be, lawyers, everyone working. There can't be any back deals because everyone has to be on their best behavior and has to have a fair trial. We also think that it's an important in terms of it helps to guarantee a fair decision, but it's also an educational opportunity for people to see how fair trials should work, because this is something that is notably absent. Everyone in Egypt is watching this. We also think it's a healthy catharsis for Egyptian society, because rather than rallying around something like hunting down, Mubarak's old supporters, or something, having these violent mobs with all these sort of feelings of resentment since the revolution running around doing something like that, everyone's able to sort of rally around watching this trial and seeing this supposed dictator essentially be brought to justice. Because let's be honest, he's really old. He was in a hospital bed in a cage. You're not ever going to be able to put him to jail, sort of for what he's done. He is guilty, and so we think that this is not only a check against dictatorship, but one of the healthiest ways to deal with something like a horrific dictatorship like.
Okay, so I actually want to start with the first thing that Katie said, which is the fact that Hosni Mubarak was a terrible dictator and Mubarak. Okay, so I actually want to start with the first thing that Katie said, which is the fact that Hosni Mubarak was a terrible dictator and ought be brought to justice, ought be punished. So this is an important point. I think most people in the world agree with this. The problem with this assertion, however, is that it's the exact reason why this trial should not be televised, because of that presumption of guilt automatically, which, no matter what you say, like, the idea of justice being blind indicates that he needs a fair trial, he needs to be able to be entitled to all of those benefits, regardless of whether we think he's guilty now, and he's done a lot of terrible things. So all of the benefits that Katie's talking about on her side of the case, and I'm going to get to my own points, how people learn about how a fair trial works, how people can rally around their system of law, they all go away because you have, frankly, a lawless system, and you have a system entirely based on political posturing when it's about playing to the public as opposed to playing to a jury, trying to work up sympathy and play on the jurors' fears and their fears of being retaliated against for a wrong decision. So the first thing I want to really talk about is this idea that a public figure is still entitled to justice. And despite the fact that we say that public figures are entitled to a higher, they are allowed to receive more scrutiny from the public, they still, when we think this is going to have a significant effect on the outcome of justice, I think they're still entitled to privacy. Look at Casey Anthony, who's constantly in the news. There was no evidence for why she should be put in jail, and yet jurors had to fear for their lives because there was no reason, everyone was so afraid of this. You ignore the real issues involved in the trial, it becomes about politics,
because I actually think they flow to my side of the house, and I talk about my argument a lot more. So she says the problem is this presumption of guilt, and that even someone who's a dictator, and even someone who would probably are sure he's guilty, deserves a fair trial. I actually think that by televising it, you ensure him more of a fair trial, because not only do you have Egyptian scrutiny as a nation, but you have much more international scrutiny. And so not only does this prevent sort of back deals being made that might be able to benefit Mubarak or sort of get him off the hook, but it also prevents people from having this very vigilante approach to justice, or having ridiculous punishments like hanging him from his ankles and beating him to death, because they know that they have to essentially have this fair trial because everyone's going to be watching this. She also talks with this idea of a lawless system. Okay, it's not a lawless system. It's the Egyptian high national court that everyone's watching. So sort of everything about oh, this is crazy and there's no system and all this doesn't exist. And the other thing she talks about is this problem of playing to the public and the media as opposed to the judge. But see, here's the thing. Again, by televising it, you actually force people to fight fair, and you force them to do this in a respectable way within the rules of a court of law, because there's a public scrutiny, because everyone's watching. If you close the doors of the courtroom and no one knows what's going on, all of a sudden anything could be going on in that courtroom, and then when they come out with the decision, especially if people disagree with it, there could be a feeling that they don't really know if that's true or not, or that justice hasn't been served. And so in terms of this whole idea of having a fair trial and serving justice, it's better if people know what's going on and everyone's on their best behavior, just in general.
So I want to address something a little bit different, which is the specific idea of televising the debate, which is what's really important. So I think So, well, Katie, so I want to address something a little bit different, which is the specific idea of televising the debate, which is what's really important. So I think we get a lot of the benefits of transparency in the way that, for example, a lot of transcripts are released after the fact, in the way that information comes out after the fact, that you can achieve transparency through understanding who the judge is, who the attorneys are. These things are all going to be very public. They're going to be very much in the news, and you achieve that kind of transparency. The problem with televising the debate is that it opens things up much more to the ability to just simply showcase. Now, the problem with what Katie said about making people fight fair, the problem is the current situation in Egypt means that people are actually calling for some of these probably terrible punishments to be done, to be actually imposed upon Mubarak. People would probably want him to be hung by his ankles because he's responsible for the death of some of their family and friends. Like, this is reasonable. People, have a right to feel this way. But if you're talking about both teaching people that what a good, dignified legal system should be like because they don't yet know, and also forcing these people to make sure that justice is being served, they can't be people who both don't quite understand what it is to serve a fair punishment and people who are insisting, calling for the punishment. That just frankly is contradictory. So ultimately it hurts the justice system. People don't learn what a good justice system is if they say, oh wow, it's all about this show, it's all about